Happy to start it off.
Yeah, you are a necessary ingredient of those.
So when I got home last night, I went into my room and I heard the ticking of the clock when my mind settled. And so I realized that my sense of myself, my sense of awareness, is like the ticking of that clock. When there's a lot of experience or noise, I don't hear the ticking of that clock, even though it's there, even though it's very audible. But when I tune in, it becomes very evident that the ticking of that clock has always been there. And that's how I feel when I come to these retreats, that I can hear the ticking of that clock much more clearly. I suppose my question is that when we experience ourselves and are aware of ourselves, it seems to imply a kind of duality. How can I be myself, but also be aware of myself? Because that implies a subject and an object.
The simple question is because awareness is your true nature. It doesn't need an object to an agent to perceive itself. When it projects a world, a body, and a mind, it perceives itself as this world, this body, and this mind. And in the absence of the world, of the body, and of the mind, it knows itself as pure perceiving, beyond time. There is no time there. As long as there is time elapsing, there is a projection of a world, a body, and or a body or a mind, but there is phenomenal projection. So when we have a sense of self that lasts, what we are perceiving is an object still. The sense of self is an object.
Yes.
As a projection in the mind or in the body. But it's an object which is very close to its source. We are the source. When this object vanishes in the source, there is only pure consciousness. We are beyond the world, beyond the body, beyond the mind, and beyond time.
So it's not that we're necessarily aware of ourselves, because that too, the awareness of ourselves too, is a perception. It's that we become ourselves, and in that we are pure consciousness.
The awareness of oneself is not a phenomenal perception. The problem is that we believe it to be a phenomenal perception, and this a false view needs to be corrected. It's It's a place of intelligence, of love, of certainty, and of beauty also. An object which is close to this source reflects the source, and that's poetry, right? And it becomes a sacred object. A sacred object is an object that really shines. The light reflects the light of the source. But the source knows itself. The alchemists called it the black sun. It has the power of the sun. It shines upon everything, but at the same time, it is invisible. So it's black. In fact, it's transparent. That which gives existence to everything is not visible as a thing because it is not a thing. It knows itself as love, happiness, beauty, etc. That's how it knows itself, as truth. Truth, love, beauty. That's how it knows itself. Not as an object, not as something cold, something. And our mistake is to try to see it as an object and also to, at some point, to have a lack of discrimination between the source and the shiny sacred object. There is nothing wrong with the sacred objects, quite the opposite, of course. Unless we mistakenly believe they are the source.
What is it then, this sense of myself? I have a sense of my thoughts, a sense of my body, but I also have a sense of myself.
Well, you know that you're conscious.
Yes.
You know it from an experience.
Yes.
How long does it take?
Instantaneous.
So, therefore, it has no phenomenal quality, you see, because it's instantaneous.
Oh.
It doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a length. It doesn't have a weight. It doesn't have a duration. It doesn't have a localization. You see?
Yes.
But you are very much present. You are the one knowing that you exist. You are the one knowing that there is something rather than nothing. And you're the one knowing that you're conscious. And the fact that it doesn't take long, no, it's instantaneous. Phenomenal qualities require time.
Yes.
It takes time to recognize the red color. That's why, for instance, in the experience of the moment of understanding, even ordinary understanding, at the moment of understanding, I know two things. I know, number one, that I am present and conscious, because I am the one who understands, and I am aware. I need awareness to understand. Right? So yes. I am aware. I am present in the moment of understanding. And then I can make the determination that understanding doesn't last, because it's an instantaneous shift from kind of not having the answer to having the answer. You cannot have half of the answer. This is what I mean. Either you get it or you don't. Yes. So there is and so this moment of understanding, the only thing we know, we are very present. We are in a heightened level of alertness, so to speak, in this moment. And it's not what we call enlightenment, right? Understanding. It becomes an enlightenment the moment we ask ourselves the question, am I limited? And we go to this, or is consciousness limited? And in order to answer this question, we need to have a glimpse of consciousness. We need to glimpse at consciousness. It doesn't take long, right? It's instantaneous. But this glimpse that tells us, I don't know, I don't see any limit to consciousness, is in fact enlightening, because you cannot know anything about consciousness for certain without having the experience of it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not something intellectual that we get from memory, from other people, from hearsay, or from indirectly through inference. It's something we know directly from experience. How do I know from my experience of consciousness, from that place that tells me that I am conscious, that tells me that there is something rather than nothing, that place, does it tell me that it is limited? No. You see? Does it tell me that it is in time, that it changes in time? Does it tell me that?
The opposite.
Yeah, right, you see? So, and that's the origin of what this psychologist calls, or neurologist, the neuroscientist, the hard problem of consciousness. It's not a problem at all.
So to know myself is also the same as being myself.
What?
To know myself is to be myself.
That's true. It's a better way to know oneself. It's better to be yourself and to know yourself through being it, rather than to perceive yourself without being yourself.
Yes.
What scientists forget, not all of them, no, but in the current condition of academia, most of them, the instruments through which we know everything we know is consciousness. And we cannot know anything about consciousness. We cannot derive any knowledge about consciousness from objects that appear in consciousness. That's a fundamental epistemologic mistake to believe that from something which is less than consciousness, objects appearing in consciousness, whatever that is, YouTube videos or lectures in colleges or experiments on monkeys or mice or scientific theories, all of that appears in consciousness. All of that never perceives consciousness, never perceives consciousness. In order to know something about X, we need to perceive X, or we need to know someone who has perceived X and tells us something about it. So, in order for an object to tell us something about consciousness, either this object has perceived consciousness, or it derives its knowledge from another object that has perceived consciousness. Good luck with that, because objects are perceived, objects don't perceive. So there is a huge fallacy, and that's the problem of consciousness explained, for the dummies, You know what I mean? It's not complicated. Science, the scope of which is restricted to phenomena, is never able to tell us something about consciousness.
Yes.
And the epistemologic mistake that is made in this case is the forgetting of what I have just mentioned, which is in fact the choice which is made in science to restrict the scope of the inquiry to phenomena. And in addition to that, to a certain type of phenomena, I'm not going to, but phenomena that can be subjected to peer review. So for instance, a one-of-a-kind phenomenon is not really it's not really a part of the scientific inquiry. The greatest physicists of the 20th century, they knew it. They were not a member of the congregation of scientism, which is the belief that science knows everything. Because that's extremely reductionist. It denies art, for instance. It denies love. It denies, and there is something very, very, reductionist. Then everything loses its soul. A science that is limited to the physical phenomena has lost its soul. There is no room for art. And we can see that in our education, how art, and it's been going on for a long time. It was already the case when I was a child, that artistic activities, music, drawing, whatever. That was considered to be not important. That which was important is to know how to make additions. So we could become a good accountant and work somewhere for a company who was trading goods with some distant place. It's about money. It's about the physical stuff. Make no mistake about it. We don't educate our children for happiness, but for quantity, not for quality. So art is excluded. And love. Art is about the beauty, love. It's restricted to understanding, intelligence, which is important, right? But as I said, the soul is missing. You can find that also, I mean, everywhere in the modern world. So there was this architect in France who was one of the founders of the modern architecture, of the modern art. His name is Le Corbusier. And Jean-Claude, it was before, I think before World War II. At that time, he was evolving in some artistic circles in Paris. There was a group of intellectuals, artists, writers around Montparnasse. And he was invited to the inauguration of a house built by Le Corbusier. And when he came there, then Le Corbusier asked him, what do you think? And he said, he told me his answer was, I am missing the ghosts. You see, he meant, I'm missing that which in the architecture, that which the eyes cannot see. I'm missing the invisible. Then what you get is a white box. It's like this modern architecture where you have only a universe of concrete, glass, and metal. And on purpose that way, where trees are banished, it's considered to be old school. And rightfully so, the current king of England was rebellious against that. He was telling the architects, I mean, come on. And they say, oh, this guy is passé, he doesn't get it, he's not one of us. He's not one of us. I'm not one of them either. I booed once a modern production at the Paris Opera vehemently with full lungs. They hated me. The members of the Church of Postmodern Art, they were with their cell phone taking a video of me, thinking that they would impress me, that I could have their video posted somewhere on the internet, and that as a result, I would be cancelled. And yes, I was giving them in the meantime my spiritual middle finger. Okay. That was a long explanation. No, it's. I mean, it's not against the law to have some fun,
Yes.
from time to time, right?
Yes. I would love to go with you to the Museum of Modern Art in Paris. Just see your reaction to all of the modern art. Because I remember going there. It's a strange place.
You remember what?
I remember going to the Museum of Modern
Yes.
Art in Paris. It was a strange place.
Strange place.
Yes. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This...
there is not much fun for the eyes there. We went there actually with Barbara. We went there in December. We went there because there was a guy in France who was a thief. And he was kind of an interesting guy. He was what we call in France a montanlaire, which is a guy who can climb buildings like that, you know, and he would always find ways to go and to burglarize. But he was only burglarizing the filthy wealthy. And then at some point he decided to burglarize, and he succeeded. The museum. So we went there to see how he entered, whatever, to see the place. Not really, we had no illusion regarding the pieces that were exhibited there. I mean, there might have been one or two that I liked. Barbara didn't like any. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you go to Paris, I don't recommend this one, but I recommend Berthe Morisot at what's the name of the museum? In the 16 Ranelagh. Berthe Morisot in Paris. There is a museum with beautiful paintings.
Okay, le 16e. My follow-up question would be that this sense that I have of myself, or this sense of the space or the awareness, the stillness, I am told that that is me. Okay, I can get that. But then I am told that that is everything. It's hard to make that leap from this is me to this is everything.
It's hard the moment you see me still as an object. And one way that may perhaps help is, you know, we have nouns and we have verbs. And nouns are used in the language to qualify objects that remain identical to themselves over time, like we have a noun for a flower, for a chair, for a mountain. Whereas verbs always apply to something that to a change, right? To a movement, to except the verb to be, right? But if we usually it's a verb relates to an action, and but both an action, a verb, and a noun still refer to things that are perceived. When we think about consciousness, the fact that we use a noun, we see it as an object, right? And that is good to use a noun because a consciousness remains identical to itself over time. However, it gives us the impression that it is an object. So we could see also consciousnessing as a verb, right? As an activity.
Yes.
It's neither because it's not an object, right? But if we eliminate the noun quality of consciousness, then it kind of escapes its objectivity.
Mm.
And because its objectivity implies that it remains in space and time. If it remains in space, it's localized, it's here, right? It's somewhere in the body. In our the way we conceptualize consciousness, it's important to delocalize it in our conceptualization. Any physical object is localized, right?
Yes.
So we tend, if we delocalize consciousness, we de-objectify it.
And then it becomes an activity, consciousnessing.
Not necessarily an activity, it's neither.
Yes, okay.
But it's a way to de-objectify it
yes.
by saying, okay, it's also consciousnessing. It's not just something static, but it's neither. It's not.
Yes.
It's not local.
That's right. Well, about it being local, in my experience, it does seem to have this centeredness here. That is hard to see past, to not see it as centered here. It's almost, that seems very difficult because it does feel centered here as opposed to over there.
Well, you can see it as a center. The French philosopher Pascal, he was a mathematician also, and he has this word. Okay, it's fine, it's a center, but he says, he said, imagine a circle, the center of which is everywhere, and the periphery, un cercle dans le centre est partout et la circonférence nulle part. And the circumference, the periphery, nowhere.
Mm. Mm. It's a false sense of it being a center here. It's my concept.
It's true and false. It becomes false the moment you see the center in space and time.
Mm.
It becomes true the moment you see space and time in the center.
Mm.
That's why the center is everywhere, right?
Mm.
Because Pascal should have said everywhere is in the center.
Mm.
Or he could have said everywhere is in the center.
Mm. It is my concepts that make the center into me.
Yeah. It's often it is as we are as stupid in ignorance as believing that the pronoun I is what we are.
Mm. Mm.
When we
Yes.
think about it,
Yes.
it's preposterous to limit ourselves to being a pronoun.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But in my case, it was something that I discovered. And when I discovered it, it was such a surprise that this consciousness would believe to be this simple I thought that appears in it. Ultimately, we have I thoughts and I feelings.
Mm.
I thoughts are
Yes.
mind stuff, right?
Yes.
And I feelings are bodily sensation stuff.
Mm.
But in particular, an I thought always start with I or me, right? Which is I if I am the subject and me if I am whatever, complement or the object. But I, me, it's the same. A pronoun. And the I feelings, they also are very, when you take them to, when you go to the bare bones of the I feelings, it's something vague here or here or here.
Mm.
Because if we remove this I, me pronoun, then all the sentences in our thoughts that involve I and me, they fall apart.
Mm.
You see, we cannot say I am miserable because I want this. I could be happy if only if I need this. I hate this person, etc. All of that is about I, me. If we cut the me, it's like we have cut the head of the monster. And then what remains is just this space, this openness that in which the me appears, the world appears, the body appears, everything appears, but from being this object appearing, we are the openness in which everything appears.
Mm.
You know. And then at that moment, if we are an object that appears, right, there are other objects with which this object interact. It can be dangerous, it can be, etc. And this object, other objects appear and disappear. So this object, which is me, can also appear and disappear. It's extremely, its existence is very precarious, you see. Because in fact, it's not real. Whatever appears lacks reality because whatever appears borrows its reality from the presence in which it appears. So when we move from being this I, which is in the picture with everything else, one among many, to the space, then there is no competition, there is no threat, and there is reality. So that's a first contact with reality. And then the world itself, because the world itself and other people, they interact with this reality. It means they belong to the same reality. So once we connect consciousness with reality, and we understand that interaction with whatever requires a common reality, yeah, then we lose our limitations.
Thank you.
Francis, this is a kind of a continuation of a question that I asked last week. But you just said, you come to the point you ask, is consciousness limited? And then if one is honest enough to say honest enough, the answer is, I do not know. Is there a point in one's sadhana where one then says, I'm unlimited?
Yes, there are many points. Because in the glimpse, we know it. And this glimpse leaves a trace in the mind. But the trace in the mind cannot be 100% reliable. Let me explain. You have the experience of God. And then you are certain God appears to you on top of the elephant with the dancers and of course, the miracles and everything. But this experience doesn't last. And 2 days later, although something in you has changed, you cannot put your finger upon what has changed, and you say, yes, there is God. The phenomenal experience, the elephants, the beauties, is no longer there, right? And then you may ask yourself, oh, perhaps I hallucinated. Perhaps I was deluded. You see, in other words, although the mind has been transformed, and the body possibly by this experience, as a result, it has created an openness to God. You have become a religious person. But at the same time, you cannot be certain I didn't hallucinate, because the mind has no access to certainty. That's why this certainty, so that's the bad news. With the mind, we cannot be certain. We would like to be certain because we want insurance. But there is no insurance. That's the bad news. The good news is that we don't need insurance. Because the house, because the house is made of water, and so it cannot catch fire. It's an igloo. You don't want to have a fire insurance for your igloo.
So one comes to a point of, I do not know. But then you said,
I do not know is the mind. You see, the mind has no access.
It's the mind which says, I do not know.
Yes. And when we live in this not knowing, there is another kind of knowing, which is experiential. And this knowing knows itself. It is knowledge in identity instead of knowledge through perception, through objective perception. We know it because we are it. We know consciousness because we are consciousness. We don't know it as an external object, such as a flower. We are not the flower in that sense. But the knower knows itself not as it knows the flower, but it knows itself directly. It's in its DNA to know itself.
Yeah. So it seems that this real knowing that you're pointing out right now, in a way, cannot be described, and it's non-verbal.
Yeah,
it's
so,
just experiential, period.
But that's, I can point at it because that's from this knowing that we know I am conscious. You know, that's the beauty of it. We know that we are conscious. You see, the philosopher Kant, he wanted to, because he was kind of jealous of physics, chemistry, you know, mathematics, because you can, the science at the time, you know, 18th century and 19th century was growing at a fast rate, you know, it was quite impressive. And the way science was growing is from some foundation and then building up. And he tried to do the same with philosophy. However, when you build something, you need to start somewhere. It doesn't come out of thin air. So I can't try to find, he said, okay, I need something to start my philosophy from. And he liked to give words because, so he said a priori. So he says there are two types of knowledge. There is a knowledge a posteriori, but there is a knowledge a priori, which is a knowledge that I cannot prove it to you, but it proves itself to you. And therefore, we can admit that as a foundation of my philosophical system. And then these are the building blocks, and we are to build from there. And so he was called this knowledge a priori. So far, so good. It's good. The problem is that what is it that you choose to start with? What is it that you decide that you are absolutely certain of? So I don't remember which, I don't know whether the philosopher, it's been a long time, but which his a priori were. But he had several ones and too many. You know, it's like an axiomatic system which has too many axioms, and you can have a problem because they can fight each other. So then everything collapses. But no, that's a different story for our friends who know what I'm talking about. But too many axioms. But here, if we ask ourselves, what is it that I am absolutely certain of? It's very simple. I'm absolutely certain that there is something rather than nothing. That's obvious. And I am absolutely certain that I'm conscious. And what am I certain beyond this? Nada. Nichts, nothing, zilch, you know, zilch. That's it. The question is, can I build a philosophy out of this? You cannot build a complicated philosophy, especially if you say from the onset that these two certainty, I am conscious, and there is something rather than nothing. In other words, there is consciousness, there is reality, or being, there is being. If you say that these two certainties, in fact, are one, that they are two sides of the same coin, at that moment you're cooked, because you cannot develop a complex philosophy. Why? Because you need ingredients. You know, in order to create something which is complex, you need at least two. Because if you have two, you say, okay, I have two, they are real, then I put these two together, so the two together are a third one. Now I have three, or now I can play. I have A, B, C, so I could put A and B together. I'm going to call it D, B, A, C together, etc. And in this way, immediately from two things. But here we reduce, we go in the opposite direction. We have two things. We say, no, that's an illusion. That itself is an illusion. These two things are one. Now you're cooked. You cannot become a university philosophy professor because your graduate course will be very simple. There is only one reality. Goodbye.
I understand when you say there is something rather than nothing. Is there any way you can put this without using those words?
What?
Any other way to say this without these words, that I am something rather than?
No, there is something rather. I say there is something rather than nothing.
Yes.
For instance, there is a flower. That's already something. I say there is something rather than nothing. My saying it is already something.
Yes.
Right? And even if nobody says anything, I notice that there is nothing. So my noticing that there is nothing is already something. In other words, consciousness is already something. So the other way to say it is what Parmenides says. He says, being is, and non-being is not. So it sounds like something a tautological, like a tautology, but it is not. Because what it means is, because there is something now, there is something rather than nothing, out of the two possibilities, either there is something or there is nothing. The possibility there is nothing has to be excluded experientially. You see, experientially, it doesn't mean anything to say, to even envision nothingness. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. And Jean-Paul Sartre, in its magnificent intelligence and stupidity, spend, I don't know, 500. Fortunately, not too many people have read L'être et le néant, his book about being and nothingness. And the problem with that is that intellectually, you can put being and not being as concepts and see them as opposites, have a dialectic between them, you know, and play with them. And then from that, as I said earlier, you have two things off. I can write a book, make money, become famous. So make money, not perhaps not in Sartre, but, you know, have good sex. Yeah, because he was not good looking, so he needed something to boost his ego and to have a relationship with a very good-looking lady like Simone de Beauvoir. So, but at the time, it was not very ecological because 500 pages of paper for nothing. That's the case for nothing, right? 500 pages. So I could say that existentialism is really the art of nothingness. Yeah. Much ado about nothing.
Much ado about, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for nothing.
Exactly. It's about fun, you know. Life is about fun. It's not about getting bored to death by reading. Does existence come first or does essence come first?
Can there be an element of sweetness to fear?
A sweetness to fear?
Yeah. Can there be an element of sweetness to fear?
Yes, if you are in your bed, you know, it's cold outside. You have a hot tea and some chocolate, right? And you watch a thriller. So you are afraid, right? But you have the sweetness. Well, you know, it's not in the theory what we talk about here. It's what we experience when we are together. It's this thing, you know. That the weather is back to California, which is a good sign. They had enough of Shropshire. Bad karma. Well, it was very sweet. Thank you all. Thank you.